We're setting our windows, our exterior doors. Now we come back, and again, here we go. Another big decision in front of us. We've got to side this building. We've got to put siding on. We could go real cheap, and we could decide to put a vinyl siding on. Well, we could really lose our mind and put an aluminum siding on. That's even cheaper. Just scratch that option off your list, would you? Aluminum siding, I can't even believe who developed that. You know, one kid with a baseball, all of a sudden denture siding, it's ridiculous. Just forget that aluminum siding ever existed. Vinyl siding certainly has a function. Large apartment complexes where they've got to build them relatively cheap, where they're wanting to, keep their maintenance costs down. I get the whole vinyl siding thing in a certain use. Being an old carpenter, I can't help but not like plastic that's made to look like wood. But I do understand its function and purpose in large complexes. In this 6 unit that we're building, we've got a market that's buying our building eventually that doesn't want the big complex thing. If they wanted that, they'd be a whole different buyer. They're coming after our smaller complex because they want a sense of more quality, and they don't want to be one among a sea of humanity. Vinyl siding isn't going to work for what we're doing in our market. You make the decision for what you're doing. Personally, I'm going to stick with an all-natural wood siding. Now, there are all kinds of composite materials out there in this day and age, and about 80% of them seem to have problems downstream. Composite materials mean like an OSB, an oriented strand board, manufactured siding that's made to look like real wood. Of course, the exterior that we see, it's pre-painted, but it's a composite material. It's chipboard made to look like real wood. You can see the problem. Chipboard getting wet swells. Over time, if you don't keep that siding perfectly dry, it's going to have problems. All right? One gutter that gets plugged. Watch this. One downspout that gets some leaves on it, where all of a sudden now your gutter is full and the water from your gutter is cascading down your building, hitting your landscape bed, splashing up against your siding. All of a sudden the first 5 rows of your siding are destroyed instantly with a composite product siding material. Now that wouldn't happen with vinyl. I'll give it that. You just hose it off and down the road you go, okay? Problem with vinyl is it doesn't represent quality. It represents cheap, utilitarian. Our market for this little boutique 6-plex condo is not cheap. We've got to make it look quality. My recommendation, as hard as it is to get good exterior, natural cedar siding, that's my preference. I've built a lot of apartment buildings many, many, many years ago, like 20 years ago, that are as solid today as I built them then. They haven't moved an inch. 6 inch to the weather, 4 inch to the weather. The less to the weather provides a look of more quality. I'll give you a couple hints of how to create the look of richness without spending a lot of money. Back to those gable ends of our building, those upside down V's. We can take just the gable ends that are up high, and we could put a different type of siding up high in the gable ends, representing just a small amount of square footage, and then a less expensive siding on the main body of the house or of the building. But just that higher quality siding up in the gable ends, for example, like a nice cedar shingle siding that has a nice stained natural finish, and then the rest of our siding is a 6-inch beveled cedar siding, painted. The painted beveled cedar is much cheaper than the shingle siding in the gable end, but by putting some shingles there, we represent at least a feeling of quality, but we don't spend a lot of money. Siding is one of those things, too, that you can see now how our decision around the sheeting is going to have a lot to do with our overall siding picture. To put a real expensive siding on top of a gyp-lap gypsum product sheeting is ridiculous. Your quality has to stay consistent throughout, and your sheeting needs to be quality to handle and make worthwhile your quality siding. If you're going to put vinyl siding on, go ahead and put gyp-lap underneath. Because the vinyl is going to look like crap anyway, you might as well have crappy sheeting, right? All meeting code. You have to make decisions. Am I going to just be a code builder, or am I going to try to put some quality in this? All having to do with your end desired market, okay? I'm all about natural wood products for siding. That's what you need to know. Now, of all the homes and buildings being built, I would say that natural wood products represent less than 20% of what's being put on right now. Why? Cost. But cost, when you're keeping a building, is a relative thought, isn't it? It's sort of the saying, if you don't have the money to do it right the first time, where are you going to find the money to do it over again? You see so many buildings being built, and 7 or 8 years from now, they're tearing it all off and they're redoing it again. Usually with some class action lawsuit involved with the manufacturer that they're blaming for not providing a product that lasts over time. You know what? We've been using natural wood products for a lot of years, and they all seem to work just fine. Why don't we stick with that? That's my take on it. You're going to make some decisions on this, okay? One of the things that, when we're talking siding, that we haven't addressed yet is the blocking that needs to be installed where your rafter tails or your truss meet the top plate. We've got to have ventilation at that point throughout that top plate that provides ventilation to the attic. We've got our roof jacks up high on the roof that provide ventilation, but we also need ventilation down low. And this is where spending a little bit of extra time making sure that your blocking is tight, that it's enough ventilation, and that it's screened properly so that birds and mice and bats and all kinds of things don't crawl up in there. A little bit of extra time to make sure that that's done and installed correctly. But we definitely need to provide ventilation on that side. So don't just get all excited siding and side right up through those bays. There needs to be ventilation there. All right, so we've now got a weather-tight building, right? We've got a roof on, we've got the siding up, we've got our sheeting, we've got our windows in, we've got our exterior doors set. We've come there. Now let's talk about finishing this in terms of the paint and the actual finishing of the materials that we've put on the exterior of this building. If you and I were really committed to doing this right and one time, here's exactly how we would do it. We would take all of our natural wood siding products and off-site in a nice dry warehouse, we would lay them all out, let them just get bone dry, and then we would spray on front and back of this siding material our paint product, usually a base of primer on all of it, and then come back and paint it on. Or if we're staining, the same process with a semi-transparent or transparent stain. We would do that off-site and get at least 2 coats on the material before we even brought it out to the job site. Then once it's on the job site, we'd install it, mask off our windows, and then we would hit it again to put a coat on the final and to cover all of our nail holes, etc. Of course, after a thorough caulking around all of our windows and seams. The reality is, that's very expensive. That off-site preparation of materials takes a lot of time. What I can say is that if you do a very thorough job, once you get your siding on, allowing it to dry, really allowing it to dry, which of course you're trying to time your construction to give yourself a chance to have some dry weather for that siding once it's on to dry. Then to come back once it's dry and do all of your caulking, of the exterior. All the seams on your siding need to be caulked. All around the windows need to be caulked. All the doors, everything caulked properly. Then mask off all the windows, everything you don't want paint on, and spray a primer on everything first. Then once the primer's on, come back and spray the main body. That's kind of a minimum that you need to do to get a nice exterior finish on this material. I can tell you that most of the buildings I've built have been exactly that process. But I can tell you that in the Oz category buildings that I've built, all the siding material has 4 coats, dipped 4 coats, before it ever comes to the site. Dipping a shingle, for example, in the finish not only covers it, you dip it, you take a brush, lap it off, and then you set it on a chicken wire grid to dry. And then when it's all done, you do it again and again and again. 4 coats on before it ever sees the job site, and then 1 once it's on the wall. So how far do you want to take it? Know that there's a lot of options there. And of course, the greatest cost you'll spend in building this building isn't the materials, it's the labor. And so you're going to have to make decisions along the way. There's some choices for you, okay? One thing we haven't talked about from a above ground standpoint is the actual gutter system on this building. Gutters are something that, again, you can spend 17 cents a foot for a rolled gutter that rolls out of the back of a truck and is installed in a matter of minutes. Or you can spend $25 a foot for a heavy, beautiful copper gutter with bracket. Where do we draw the line? That's a huge difference. Well, again, if I'm building something to keep for 10, 15 years, I'm going to spend a little bit more money on gutters. The cheap roll out of the truck gutters, the minute you lean one ladder against them, you dent them, and they're garbage. I'm going to spend some money on having some heavy gauge aluminum gutters put up there with nice drop scupper leads that feed into the downspout. Not just where somebody takes the end of their screwdriver, punches a hole, a couple tin snips, flares it out and sticks the downspout up there. That's 90% of gutters and downspout systems you see out there. So that every single leaf, every single needle, every single piece of debris gets caught right there when it goes down. A scupper system is where the actual hole gets cut. An insert goes into the bottom of the gutter. It's riveted and sealed, forming a nice smooth transition between gutter and downspout, where it doesn't catch a bunch of crap. That little labor difference will save you many, 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 many hours of headache in the future cleaning out gutters that are plugged and overflowing. All right? So a little bit more money on gutters for the hold property. Again, if you're building this to keep, a gutter is a gutter for 99 out of 100 people. They look up, oh, gutter, downspout, all looks the same. From 15 feet away, they all look the same. How they're installed, the gauge of metal, and the drop system from the gutter to the downspout is a big deal if you're keeping that building, okay? Being from the Northwest, I think about natural wood products. I mean, we live in the Weyerhaeuser central of the world, right? Wood is our thing in the Northwest, but there are many areas where the predominant exterior finish isn't wood. I mentioned the home we have in Arizona. You're building for the area, not only in terms of its style, but in terms of what is very acceptable in that area in terms of quality, right? So Arizona, we're going to be dealing with a whole different type of siding. We're not going to be putting a cedar siding on. Our home in Arizona is a combination of adobe brick and then stucco. The point I'm making with every siding choice you make is that there's the real way and the right way, and then there's the quick and the cheap way. Take stucco, for example. A true plaster stucco job involves a very long process of preparation, first starting with a very excellent sheeting, a huge vapor barrier, preferably a sealed vapor barrier on the outside of that sheeting, all of the mesh preparations, and then a natural mixing of the plaster of the stucco material that then is troweled over the mesh in several different coats to provide a truly natural stucco finish. Exterior is bulletproof if it's done right. What we find is that we can create a product that at least temporarily looks the same by coming up with composite materials that allow the process to go faster, and yet they're unproven. And therefore, we can get a product that looks the same day one, but will it look the same 10 years from now? And in the stucco world, you don't need to be told how many buildings that were created in kind of a shortcut method with a drive-it finish that looks similar to stucco, but isn't. How many of those then have been stripped and had to be redone because they leak and they're not sealed properly? So what I'm saying that pretty much goes across the board is find out the right way to do something and lean as much as possible towards doing it the right way if you're planning to keep this project for a period of time. Because many, many multiplexes are built down in Arizona. I'd love to build some someday that are a stucco finish. Well, I'm going to do it the right way because I'm going to have it over time versus the spec housing way, the low-end spec housing way that produces a finished product that looks nice, and in 5 years, I call it disposable housing. That's what's being built out there a lot these days. And so lean towards quality. Many homes out there in various areas of the country are predominantly a brick or a stone finish. Again, there's two different actual construction methods when you've got something that looks like a brick house. There are those that the whole exterior wall is made of brick. Most of them, though, are a wood frame wall, sheeted on the outside, vapor barrier, and a brick facade on the outside of a wood sheeted home. Both can be excellent, and both have various ways of ensuring that they're done properly. Build for your area. Build for your market. Cost it out. Lean towards quality. That's what I'm saying. The other day, my wife and I were driving around in our hometown, and we went by a job site under construction. It looked to be a nice-looking home, certainly in a nice area. As we got closer, of course, my eye of detail is noticing things. And all of a sudden, here I see that there is a subcontractor there working, and he's installing the stone. The way this house was designed is that the first 5 feet, kind of from the grade up 5 feet, was stone, and then there's a little bit of a flashing, and then the wood siding went up from there. And that has potential of being a real attractive look. But as I got closer, I realized he's installing the stone, and he's starting 5 feet up on the wall and working his way down. And of course, that gave it away right there that what he's installing isn't natural stone at all. What he's installing are these little, styrofoam fake rocks that he's gluing to the sheeting, and he's starting any kind of real stonework, of course, starts low and works its way up. Well, here he's starting up high and filling his way down. There's something so offensive to me about that. And I understand that we've got to make decisions around expense. But what I can tell you, there's no question in my mind, is that if you come back 5 years from now, those, quote, stones are going to be dented, missing, leaking, absorbing water, everything known to man, and it's a disaster waiting to happen. I'm all about doing things right. Stonework. If you want stonework on the first 5 or 6 feet of your home or your building to accent and to look like quality, stonework needs to work off of the footing bearing point. Now, there's a way around that, but let's start with that way first. That you take cinder blocks and block off of your footing, which, of course, can you see when this is going to happen? This all happens before you backfill the outside of that foundation wall. and you build cinder blocks up to within about 6 or 8 inches of your finished grade, and then your stonework starts there, building off of a point-loaded foundation, as it were, and then building up from there. Stonework needs to be done in very small increments because the weight of the real stone doesn't allow you to build 5 feet at once. You're going to build about a foot or 18 inches in a day, and the mortar needs time to set up so that you can then continue to add more weight on. It's a very slow process. Great stonework done right is very labor intensive, and yet there are parts of the country where you can hire really competent stone people for a lot less than you could hire carpenters. Predominantly in Arizona, constructing there are plaster and stone people everywhere. It's why all of the fences you see around properties are stone or cinder block mortared fences because they've got a labor pool down there that is very competent at laying block and stone. Much less in the carpentry world. You're going to pay a lot more for carpenters than you will stone and block masons. So where are you building, and what is your labor pool looking like? Can you afford to build what you want to build there? Building a craftsman-styled stick frame home of wood in Arizona is going to cost you a lot more than building a craftsman-style stick frame home in the Northwest, because of the labor pool of qualified talent. Building a stone or stucco home in Arizona is a heck of a lot cheaper there than it is up here in the Northwest because of the labor pool, the predominant labor pool. Also, your material costs. There's a lot more sand, therefore a lot more block and mortar work being done in Arizona than there is in the Northwest. There's a lot more wood in the Northwest. Look at where you're building and draw on the natural resources and the natural labor pool, which will help keep your costs down and help you to build something consistent for the area. Okay? All right. So we have taken a look at the exterior of this house. And again, so many decisions that we haven't made yet, but we've got this thing weather tight. We have got the siding on correctly, on some good sheeting. If we've done some accenting in stone, we've done that right. If we've built it out of stone and stucco, we've done it right. We're weather tight on the outside. But if we planned properly, let's think about that for a second. When we're siding this home, when we're doing the stonework of this home or the stucco work, we don't want to come back later and have to cut in an outlet for the outside. All of the exterior penetrations of exterior lighting, exterior power, of hose bibs that provide exterior water faucets, all of those penetrations need to be made before we finish our exterior siding. So there's a lot going on at once, but don't get in such a hurry that you finish something and then have to remodel your new construction. My perfect time frame is that when I'm finishing the sheeting of this house all the way around, the same time I'm sheeting this home, as soon as I'm standing up those walls and I'm getting my blocking done, before I actually start on the siding, I'm having the plumber and the electrician put in all of their exterior penetrations at that point. They can start by doing that quickly, even if it's just nailing on the exterior boxes or cutting the holes for exterior box lights, all of the exterior penetrations for plumbing, water heater venting, all of those things, so that when I do my siding, my finishing of the exterior, I'm not having to come back and cut out something postscript that the plumber says, oh gosh, I forgot to put a hose bib in here. You ruin the whole finished look of the thing when you have to come back. Now you're remodeling a new house. Let's not do that. Let's get all those done first. We are now moving inside the house, and I don't want to give you the impression that construction is a finish this, then go do this, finish that, then go do this. There's many things happening simultaneously, experience will allow you to coordinate those things and have as many guys there as you can where they're not getting in each other's way. But in the world of filling up the inside of these walls now, there's definitely some order. The first guy in when the framing is done inside needs to be your plumber. And the plumber starts first by putting in all the heavy plastic, the drain lines and vents for that particular floor plan. There's not a lot to know about this particular step other than it needs to be done to code. There are a few tricks, though, that I've learned along the way that might help you in certain circumstances. In this sixplex that we're building, there's going to be some party walls, some joining walls between units. Maybe it's up and down if you choose to build flats on top of each other. Maybe it's side to side if they're townhouse-styled units. But anytime there's a drain line, especially a main drain line, running where you want to protect a space from the sound of the water running in that pipe in the wall, you may choose to take that section of drain pipe and instead of putting it in ABS drain plastic, you may want to put that section of pipe in cast iron pipe. And you can simply attach your cast iron pipe to your ABS drain plumbing by using a rubber no-hub connector. The reason you use that cast iron drain plumbing in certain sections is that sound doesn't come through that cast iron pipe nearly as much as sound comes through plastic pipe. So picture, let's say you had 2 living rooms back to back, okay, on a townhouse style. But up above those living rooms was the main master bathroom. And they're also back to back. This unit back to back with that unit. So here you have somebody using the bathroom upstairs. All of that plumbing feeds into the same main line, the same vertical drain or waste drop coming down a full story. If you flushed the toilet or ran a bath, you would hear water running down that pipe in your living room. Not only would you hear it, but anybody in the next unit would also hear it. And so a way of solving situations like that is to put that section of drain pipe in cast iron pipe. In an Oz property, boy, you really think this out. I've built a few Oz properties, and any time there's even a chance of hearing drain plumbing in the wall, you just go to cast iron and solve that real quick. You want your plumber to get the penetrations through the roof done as soon as possible so that hopefully that those vent penetrations that go through your roof are done prior to the roofers roofing that section. Now, not to say a roofer can't come back and cut in the vents, but in certain types of roofing, he can't. In other words, a slate roof, a tile roof, once those things are on, that's it. The last thing you want is some plumber running a 2-inch speed bit through your tile roof, right? Or your slate roof. It's best to get all those plumbing stubs up through the roof before the roof comes through. So again, the vents always come through. Get that plumber in there. As soon as that framing is done, as soon as you've got roofers starting on that roof, those plumbers should start and have them start by putting in those vents first and work themselves down. Okay? They can definitely stub in where their vents go and get those in before that roof comes on. Okay? And then, of course, your roofer will use the right kind of flashing and rubber couplings that go over the top of those plumbing vents to give a good seal around those plumbing vents. All right, so now we've got our drain lines in. We're going to be running that main stack into the crawl space to tie into our sewer line. All of that stub through the foundation wall is already in for our sewer line. Maybe that main sewer line goes right underneath your footing. If so, you should have laid at least that section of pipe prior to setting up your footings. Okay? Much easier to do it then than tunneling under later. Let's talk water lines. There's a lot of different choices in the water line department. Not so many choices in drain plumbing, but definitely at least 3 choices in the water line department. There's PVC plastic water lines. There's PEX tubing, which is a kind of a clear plastic water line. And then there's copper plumbing. Nobody really uses the galvanized plumbing anymore, although it was used a lot, and we'll talk about galvanized plumbing as we get into remodeling. But in new construction, we're going to be using one of those three. Of the three, right now, the one that is being used more than any other is the PEX tubing. It's a bulletproof type of tubing where you can run water lines in long lengths without any joints. So there's that advantage. In terms of sizing, though, where you get into a problem with PEX tubing is when you need to run some serious volume through those lines. PEX tubing is great for half-inch water lines throughout a reasonably sized unit. Where it doesn't work so well is when you get into large single-family homes where you need to be running larger volume pipe. And in those situations, copper provides a much bigger volume run throughout your house. And so you're going to make those decisions, but your plumber is then going to be putting in all of your water lines through the house. A couple little thoughts here. It doesn't cost much more money to run a hot and cold hose bib to the garage side, so that for those that like to wash their car in the winter and use warm water, you may want to provide that for them. It's funny how little things like that provide a selling point. The downside is that you keep this thing for 10 years as a rental. If you are paying for the water bill, just like if you are paying for their hot showers, tenants tend to take long hot showers. They would tend to use more water with this. So there's the offset. In terms of the water department, even if you don't provide initially a refrigerator that has an ice maker, you may still want to provide the water box that would be installed low on the floor behind the refrigerator, so that when you sell this unit to someone that's going to buy it and live there as a condominium, they may want to upgrade the refrigerator, and therefore the plumbing to be able to hook up their ice maker is already there. It doesn't really cost any more money to put in a small little ice maker water line behind the refrigerator, whether you use it now or not. Hose bibs are something that should be well thought out in terms of where exterior water is needed. Obviously, to use a frost-free type hose bib, make sure that any coldness that you get outside isn't going to freeze the plumbing and break it from the exterior. So a frost-free hose bib for sure. When you are drilling all of these holes for your plumbing throughout the house, you need to come back through when you're done, and all of the holes that make penetrations should be plugged and stuffed with a rock wool type insulation just to plug any excess drilling for fire. That fire, if fire got in the wall, it's going to travel through those stud bays more quickly if it has open access moving from stud bay to stud bay by virtue of unplugged holes. You know, I don't know the science of fire, but I do know that the code really is fairly strict on plugging all penetrations so that fire can't travel vertically or horizontally inside of walls. So you're going to have to come back and do that. Once your plumbers are kind of well on their way, you can start with your electricians in the home. Again, everything that goes inside the walls. Electricians, if let go, will come in and wire a house to code. But wiring a house to code is really not enough thought to be put into the electrical side of the house. In other words, let me give you an example. Code says that in a bedroom, you really don't even have to have any kind of lighting provided at all. You simply can have a switch on a wall that activates a half outlet at some location throughout the bedroom, so that when you put in a freestanding lamp, then, of course, using that switch turns on a freestanding lamp. That's about as cheap as you can wire a bedroom per code. Not even putting in a light, just putting in a switched outlet. You may want to think out your market a little more than that and to spend a few dollars on some well-located can lights. The whole lighting scheme has to make sense. Spending some money on dimmer switches in strategic locations, kitchens, dining rooms, those things should all be on dimmers to create a certain atmosphere in those spaces. Costs a little bit more money, makes a big impact. So those are areas that I would definitely look hard at. But your electrician needs to get in here and get to work. You may choose to really think out a few specialty items that don't cost any more money. They just take somebody thinking about them. Let me give you an example. Let's say there's an obvious corner in the living room of this unit whereby you know that every Christmas, the Christmas tree is going to go here. Okay, well, everybody that has a Christmas tree knows that it's a pain in the butt every night to plug or unplug the lights of the Christmas tree, right? First of all, it never seems that there's enough outlets to do that, so you run extension cords. And then crawling on the floor, reaching under the tree, plugging in and unplugging lights, that's a pain. If we know that there's an obvious corner that the Christmas tree is going to go, you could put 2 outlets in that corner, both that are activated by, or at least half of the outlet is activated by a switch on the wall in a convenient location. Maybe the switch is even inside a closet in the hallway. So that, what is this switch for? Well, what it is it turns on and off the Christmas tree. When the Christmas tree is plugged into those 2 outlets, flip the switch, the lights are on. Turn the switch off, the lights are off. The same thing can happen. You can throw in a couple outlets high up near your eaves. In other words, by your gutters, up on the high on the siding, around the house, even 4 outlets up high around the outside, so that if somebody wants to put Christmas lights around the perimeter, they simply have a place to plug them into and a switch inside to turn them on and off. How easy is that? Doesn't cost any more money, a few more minutes of work, but what you're doing is you're providing something that is a little different that at least represents somebody thought about this. So lighting is a big deal. The actual light fixtures themselves, there's a lot of choices out there in the type of fixtures you pick out, and but they make a huge difference based on the overall ambiance of a room, what fixtures you're actually looking at. So take some time, think these things out. In the world of electrical, a couple more things that I have run across that aren't often done. One, I see a lot of times where the garbage disposals are not hardwired in, but they're a plug-in unit underneath the sink. I would always recommend a garbage disposal being hardwired in and in a separate breaker in the panel versus just plugged into an outlet. I believe they should be on separate circuits. If anything ever gets stuck in there, it's not taking out your whole kitchen. It simply is on its own separate circuit, own separate breaker. A couple other things that I believe are important that reflect somebody actually thinking about it. A real open living room, especially if there's a fireplace that you've put in where furniture is obviously going to face the fireplace. You can envision where furniture is going to go facing the fireplace, and you may want to take the time to put an outlet in the floor that actually has a nice cover plate that, is in the actual carpet in the living room or is set in the living room floor. Nothing worse to me than seeing a beautiful piece of furniture in the middle of the living room and a nice table and a lamp there in the middle of the living room, and then somebody's got an extension cord running 15 feet to an outside wall to plug it in. It takes away the whole scene. So thinking out where furniture may go and providing outlets for any freestanding lights in that area. The same thing with workspaces. Nice little nooks and mini dens. You can visualize where a small desk would go. And of course, when you visualize that, in that space, in the ceiling above, a couple well-placed can lights that provide lighting down on where a desk is going to be. These kinds of things show a little bit of care. that's taken in the planning of the electrical. And so these are things that I would do. Another one that's a big hit, especially for the women, is that when they're in their master bathroom, of course, women have all of these things that plug in to outlets. And they need power in the bathroom to plug in hair dryers and curling irons and these things. It doesn't take a lot of extra effort to put an outlet in a drawer. A big drawer where their hairdryer can be in the drawer and their curling iron can be in the drawer. And they all plug in to an outlet that is in the back of that drawer. That outlet can actually be wired to a timer on a wall so that even if you forget to turn something off or unplug it, to turn and activate that outlet on, you simply turn a timer on the wall, much like a fan timer. It gives you 15 minutes to use your hairdryer or your curling iron, or a half an hour, whatever you need. But when you're done, the outlet turns off so that there's no chance of one of those tools being left on. Okay, so a few little things like that make a big difference in the electrical. We've got to move our thoughts now at the same time this is going on. You've got HVAC people in there. Wow. So this whole heating and air conditioning, ventilation world, again, many, many, many choices of how we heat this place and do it efficiently. Let's go through a few of the choices in the food chain of heating. We can start as cheap as electric baseboard heat. Yuck. Terrible. I can't imagine building anything new that would have that in it. The next step up the food chain is electric in-wall forced air heaters. There's no ductwork going on here. This isn't a big furnace. It's a simple heater in-wall that has a fan built into it. Cheap, definitely better than baseboard heat, still not really the high end at all. Next step up is we have different furnace systems. Okay, so we've got oil-driven furnaces that run heat through a duct system. We've got electric-driven furnace systems that run heat through ductwork. We've got gas-fired furnace systems that run heat through ductwork. You can see that the ductwork doesn't change. Sometimes the furnace doesn't even change. It's just the power source for that furnace that changes: oil, gas, electric. It doesn't take much to take an oil furnace and convert it to a gas furnace, right? So keep that in mind, that in the remodeling world, that's fairly easy to convert an oil furnace to a gas furnace, if that's more efficient. Then we have our radiant hot water systems. So this is a whole different type of heating system. Again, no ductwork, no hot air blowing through ducts. The heating system is radiant hot water. Now, they make a lot of different types. The old buildings used to have radiant hot water freestanding registers. These heating registers that stood about 3 feet tall and varied in widths depending on the size of the room. Hot water would come to this register, heat up the whole register, and then therefore would heat the room. There's all different variations of those out today. Some of these radiant hot water systems that sit in toe kicks of cabinets that are, all these registers hidden in wonderful locations. Heating can also be put directly in the floor. Matter of fact, that's one of the highest end type heating systems out there, and one of the best is when on the lower floor, or could be through any floor of the home, the heating tubes, the PEX tubing that actually runs hot water through these tubes, is set inside the floor. How in the world does that work? Well, it's a subfloor. On top of the subfloor, the PEX tubing is attached right to the subfloor. Usually on top of that, there is a couple inches of light blown concrete troweled over the top of that PEX tubing. And then over the top of that, the actual floor, be it a wood floor or carpet or what have you, is attached to that. If you are attaching wood floor to it, of course, you need some nailing sleepers put onto your subfloor and the PEX tubing weaving in and out these nailing sleepers. But all of a sudden, what you end up with is you end up with a floor that's about 2.5, 3 inches thick with the heating actually built into the floor. which provides just wonderful heat. Again, radiant hot water heat, gas-fired boilers that heat up the water, electric-fired boilers that heat up the water and then circulate it through hot water tubing throughout the house. You can even put hot water tubing in a wall. Put the tubing in the stud bay and then sheetrock over it, and it just heats the whole wall up. So there's a lot of different ways to heat. But of course, the biggest challenge we always look at is cost. And so of that whole sphere that we just talked about, the in-wall electric forced air heating units are very, very inexpensive and reasonably efficient. And for our 6-unit building whereby the tenant is paying for their own electric, that's probably going to be on the low end of the cost scale, the way I would go to create a decent heating system at a low cost. And again, it's cost that isn't going to be paid by me anyway, okay, in terms of the bill every month. On the Oz end of the scale, it would definitely be a gas furnace or a radiant hot water heating system in your home. Even though we have a heating system that may or may not have air movement as a part of that heating system. In other words, air movement could come in the form of an in-wall electric heater that has a fan on it that pushes out the hot air and does create a certain amount of air movement. Or a furnace system that runs warm air through ducting and delivers it. That does not replace the need and code-driven requirement to provide for airflow throughout the house. So now we've got a whole nother system that involves code-driven requirements to exchange and move air. Exchange meaning taking fresh outside air and bringing it into the home, taking warm air that rises and bringing it back down to the floor levels, not only the heat, bringing in and exchanging air. We need fresh air. And so that's an entirely different system, but usually installed by your HVAC guy. Then we've got ducting that has to go in, that has to just do with venting. Venting of your hood fan on your kitchen range. That's got to be a direct vent out. Venting of your ceiling fans in your bathrooms, all of that ductwork to get them out. Venting for the dryer in your laundry room to vent to the direct outside. And again, your HVAC guy is going to be installing all this venting at the same time as he's putting in any ductwork that may be necessary for the heating system. If you're putting in in-wall electric systems, you're going to have to still hire an HVAC ductwork guy to come in and do all of that rigid ducting to get that installed properly. Okay, so we're still filling up walls here. We haven't stopped yet. Let's talk about phone and cable and Cat 5 wiring. All of this low voltage electronic type wiring needs to now come in. Sound systems. My home has 265 speakers in it. That's a lot of speakers, and they're everywhere. And so low voltage wiring everywhere throughout that house to provide wiring to all of the speakers in all of the various rooms in the house. So now we're going to start drilling. I want to tell you something that I see often as a mistake. People running low voltage phone, cable, speaker wire through the same drill holes as the electrician. Really, really silly. Really dumb, because you've got this transference of energy going on. All of your phone and your cable needs to be run in separate drill holes. Your speaker wires, separate drill holes. And Cat 5 wiring, any high-tech computer wiring, again, separate holes, separate runs to provide separation so that there isn't interference between the two. That's a lot of drilling. And when we start drilling a lot, we've got to be careful that in our drilling that we don't weaken the studs that we're drilling through. Make sure that we find ways to get wire from point A to point B where we're not just taking out the whole integrity of our framing system. this process of getting all of your wiring, electrical wiring, phone wiring, cable, Cat5, sound system, low voltage wiring, doorbell wiring, oh my gosh, everything that you're thinking about here in and installed correctly takes some real effort, takes some time. I want to find the electrician that's absolutely, the Felix Unger of the electricians. I can tell by going to a job that he's done, taking the cover off a panel box and looking at the wiring and the way it comes into that panel box. Do it sometime. Just ask the electrician that you want to hire, what's the last job you did? Go to his last job, take out a screwdriver, take the 6 screws off that panel cover, and look at the wiring. You're going to have, white and black wire and ground wire coming into that panel box. And what I want to see is I want to see that wire come in through the sides of the panel boxes. Absolutely perfect 90-degree angles down the side of that panel, 90-degree angles straight into the breaker, absolutely perfectly laid out, straight and true. No cutting corners, no bunches of wires shoved in. I want to see everything just as straight and true as it comes. That's my electrician. And when I can get a guy like that, he's going to know how to separate all of these different systems so that they don't interfere from one another, so that there's no possibility of interference. Low voltage would include things such as, of course, your doorbell, alarm systems, camera systems. All of these things is how far do you want to go? The home that I built for myself has 29 panel boxes in it. And 6 of those panel boxes are 6 foot tall. That's how much wiring is involved in an Oz-type property home. You can't even imagine. A normal home like we're talking about, 1,000 square foot unit in the 6-plex, will have one 200 amp panel box, period, done. That's it. That's what's going to happen here. But you can see the full range of what you could do. And so be very careful to think out everything that you want in, plan it, get the right electrician, and let her rip. Okay, now at that point, I would like this to be a deep pause. When your job site reaches this point, I want you to take a deep breath. Before insulation, okay? When you think you've got all of your plumbing in, all your wiring in, all of your HVAC in, everything that's going on inside those walls is all installed through your floors, I want you to take a deep breath, because this is your last chance to think out what you forgot. You're going to plug all of your penetrations through all the drill holes throughout everything with rock wool for fire code. You're going to look at the face of your studs, and any time that a drill penetration runs behind that stud, you're going to put a nail plate over that penetration. What is a nail plate? A nail plate is a steel plate that gets attached to the face of your stud, your framing stud, or your ceiling, your rafters on the ceiling. What it's doing is it's protecting so that as you screw the sheetrock on, that a screw doesn't go through the sheetrock, through the stud, and right into your water line. Okay? So that everywhere you attach that sheetrock, anytime you have penetration of plumbing moving through the studs, wiring moving through the studs, every time where it moves through the studs, you're going to put on the face of that framing a nail plate. Now, a nail plate's a 1/16 of an inch thick, and it's made out of steel, and it's about 4 to 6 inches long, and it just simply attaches to the face of the stud. But that way, when your sheetrocker is attaching sheetrock, he's going to screw the sheetrock in, and the screw is going to go in and stop. It's going to hit that steel, which is a reminder, don't push any harder, because behind that nail plate is a wire or a piece of plumbing that you don't want to screw into. Now, let me give you how extreme you could get if you were really creating Oz. Nailing that 1/16 of an inch plate onto the stud to protect your plumbing and wiring from future screws or nails coming through. Obviously, now that nail plate is a 1/16 of an inch outside of your stud. Well, as you run your hand down this 2x6 framing, all of a sudden, here's this 1/16 of an inch nail plate sticking out. Now, in the world of production construction, we're not going to worry about it. We're going to nail sheetrock right over the top of that, and you'll never see that little bump. But if you're building a multi-million-dollar home or building Oz for you, you know what you're going to do? You're going to route out a 1/16 of an inch depth where that nail plate goes, and that nail plate is going to be perfectly flush to your stud. Okay, now we're still not ready to sheetrock. I want you to pause and think. And here's what I want you to think about. I want you to think about every picture you're going to hang and where it might go. Every towel bar you're going to hang in the bathroom and where it might go. Every railing you're going to put up in the stairway and where it might go. The thickness of the base molding that you're going to put around the floor and where it might go. And the reason I'm asking you to think on these type of things is this is our opportunity to, with very little money, not buying any new materials whatsoever, to come in and put blocking in those walls where we want to be able to screw things to those walls in the future. Let me give you some more examples on this. If you know you've got a bank of cabinets that are going to run all around your kitchen at a certain level, it takes no effort at all to take some 2x6 block scraps, cut them 14.5 inches thick, which allow them to fit right inside a 16-inch stud bay, snap a line all the way around your kitchen where those cabinets are going to be, and just block the hell out of it. Put blocks in between those studs and screw them in there. So now, when you hang those cabinets, you don't have to worry about hitting a stud. You can screw those cabinets anywhere. You know you've got meat behind the wall. How many of you have been in a bathroom and you're almost afraid to hang your towel on the towel bar because the weight of the towel is going to pull the towel bar right off the wall because it's got those stupid little 1-inch plastic molly holes holding the towel bar into the wall. I want to have a towel bar that I can do pull-ups on. I want to be able to take a 3-inch screw and screw that towel bar through the sheetrock and into wood so that that towel bar is never coming off, right? Toilet paper holders, right? Shelving on walls where you want to put some shelving, right? The base molding, if you want to put a nice 6-inch painted base molding around a room, why do we want to have to hit the studs with every nail to nail on our base? If we take our scraps, cut them into blocks, and block out all around the base, in between the stud base, all around the room, now when we put our base up, no big deal. We can nail it anywhere we want. You see what I'm saying? I always keep every 2x6 and 2x4, 2x8 scrap in a separate pile so that when it comes time for blocking, I make sure I use up every scrap of that job site right now in possible blocking. Think of, here you've got a nice gas fireplace on a living room wall. Well, you know that somebody's going to want to hang a picture above that. Why not block out a whole area solid so that wherever they decided to put a screw in to hang a picture, they're screwing into wood, you see? Handrails, anything that's going to bear weight. So really think out. This is your chance to really beef this thing up and prepare for the next step. Because once you sheetrock it, it's too late. You're going to live with whatever you got. And the whole world of molly bolts, a molly bolt is something that people buy because they screwed up in the building of it. If you buy something existing, I get it. Go get a molly bolt. It wasn't your fault. If you're building something new from scratch, it's your fault if you ever have to buy a molly bolt, okay? Because you didn't think where to put backing, and it's really, really important.